And I think we're live.
All right. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Gennady Stolyarov II. I am the chairman of the United States Transhumanist Party. And we are here for our second transhumanist presidential debate. Today, we have our three candidates who are competing in the forthcoming electronic primary: Rachel Haywire, Johannon Ben Zion, and Charles Holsopple. We had a quite in-depth and constructive exchange during our first virtual debate on July 6th. And this debate is going to be a bit different in its format, in the sense that the first debate focused on the general views of the candidates regarding their own campaigns, as well as the core ideals of the US Transhumanist Party, and some issues of general interest to transhumanists. In this debate, we are going to focus more on candidate specifics and on the backgrounds of the candidates, on certain issues and indeed certain controversies that have emerged during the course of this campaign season. Our intent is to have as much transparency as we can. And if there are certain questions that people have had, if there are certain concerns that people have had, this will be a good venue to address them, but to address them in a structured and civil format where we can discuss the substance of the issues while keeping the tone constructive. So with that, our first segment of the debate is going to be a campaign update from each candidate. Essentially, since the July 6th debate, they will provide an update regarding their subsequent campaign activities, discuss the unique features of their approach thus far in campaigning for the presidency of the United States, and make any general appeals that they would like to make to our membership. Now, that is going to be the easy part of the debate, and subsequently the challenging part will begin. But first, we will start with the easy part. 5 minutes to each candidate for a campaign update. Candidate Rachel Haywire, you were selected by our random number generator to go first, so you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Hi, I'm really happy to be selected by randomness because, as you guys know, I love chaos. So my campaign has been a lot of fun. I've been doing a lot of outreach to people inside and outside of the Transhumanist Party, and I've been recruiting a lot of new members, everything from going on podcasts to growing my dissident media platform, Trigger Warning. I just released a new article on Trigger Warning called Fashion for the Faceless, an article about how to protect people from face detection systems that have dissenting political opinions. It's really important for us to be doing outreach to people from all backgrounds, whether it's political, class, subcultural, science, engineering, or artistic. It's important for us to grow our outreach beyond the Transhumanist Party, but at the same time, to keep the Transhumanist Party active. So I've been going to nightclubs, I've been going to the Church of Perpetual Life, I've been very active in the Transhumanist Party Facebook group, I've been interviewing people from all over the political spectrum, and a new album of mine just released. It's called Alternative Technology, and it has very heavily based transhumanist themes. I also was just on a podcast called The Stark Truth. The Stark Truth is a transhumanist kind of a vaporwave kind of alternative culture podcast that a friend of mine named Robert produces, and we talked about transhumanism and funding for the transgressive arts. We got into a lot of details about my campaign, and it was a lot of fun. That just happened 2 nights ago, and it should be released any day now. About 3 nights ago, I was on Detonate Nation with Steel Archer. I know a lot of other candidates, and Sultan was on the show. Gennady was on it too, and I had a really interesting conversation with Steel about my campaign and the outreach that I had been doing. I talked a little about the controversy that I had been having with fellow candidate Mr. Ben Zion, and just a really good conversation that I had with Steel occurred. I've been loving this outreach because a lot of the other candidates, they've been focusing only within the party, but I've been focusing outside of the party too. I've brought a lot of members in. One of these members is Jessica Clark. She's been modeling the transhuman t-shirts that I've been collaborating with on Transhuman Tees with. Transhuman Tees have been incredible. They've also manufactured this poster that you can see on my wall. We've been designing incredible artwork for the Haywire campaign. I have a great team of video producers, musicians, designers, and Transhuman Tees. They've been very active on my campaign. And Jessica Clark, she was the first model who began modeling for the Haywire campaign and Transhuman Tees. And she just joined the Transhumanist Party. And Jessica Clark began modeling these t-shirts, and she just issued a really touching statement against Jerry Epstein with the recent controversy that unfortunately we've all been dealing with. And people like Jessica, who I met through the occult scene, have now become members of the Transhumanist Party. And people like Jessica, they're very interested in transcendence, transcending human consciousness. They didn't necessarily know about transhumanism before, but they knew about transgression. Artists, musicians, filmmakers, they knew about transgression. They knew about culture. They knew about pushing the limits. Now they know about transhumanism, which is very, very connected to transgression, which is very, very connected to the transgressive arts, which, as you guys know, is a major part of my platform, which I was talking to Robert Stark about a couple nights ago, funding the transgressive arts. Now, why do we need funding the transgressive arts? So we can make transhumanism creative. So we can make culture about a higher state of human evolution. So we can make human evolution visionary. So we can make a visionary technology a beautiful world in which people's deepest, darkest fantasies can become a reality of virtual fantasy rather than a violent world in which people hurt each other. Imagine if instead of people getting into these violent alt-right versus Antifa street scuffles, they used their imaginations to create virtual worlds in which they expressed their hatred and their anger through simulations of their minds, through art, through music, through photography, and through film, through these new technologies, through funding the transgressive arts, through public education on transhumanism, and through universal basic income, $2,000 a month, reallocating funds, taking nonviolent drug offenders and sex workers out of prison, drastically cutting down on military spending, drastically cutting down on the surveillance state, the NSA, more like the NS, no way. We don't need that. What we need is for our people, our citizens of our great nation to receive a universal basic income. We need to double Andrew Yang's proposal of 1,000, which, while it's a great idea, is not enough to live on. We need $2,000 a month for every citizen in our nation to create an incredible world of transgressive art. We need a greater awareness on neurodiversity. These are my policies. This is not a costume. This is not makeup, as other candidates may have suggested. This is not an act. This is not a shtick. These are my policies. This is what I think the Transhumanist Party needs. And this is what I think we need to do as a party, as a species. This is what I believe evolution is about. This is what I think culture is. And this is what I think transhumanism is about. And I think that in a state of artistic decline, which unfortunately we might be in right now, in this society, our movement, our vanguard, our third party is the place in which we should be enacting these policies. Now, we are more than just a party. We are a revolution, an evolution, if you will, of creators. We are scientists, we are engineers, we are hackers, we are musicians, we are philosophers, we are visionaries. But you know what we are more than that? We are transhumanists. And it is time for us to go beyond left, beyond right, and beyond the center to create a new position. Now, what is that position? That position is evolution. And that evolution is the Transhumanist Party of the United States. And that position of evolution is the presidency of America. And I will defeat Donald Trump with a pirate spaceship because Donald Trump does not understand transgression. Donald Trump does not understand what is going on with our people. He may claim to represent working class interests, but he doesn't understand working class tech. He's never worked as an aspirational CEO in Silicon Valley. He might have done his time in Wall Street, but has he ever worked for a failing tech startup that was funded by a child rapist named Jeffrey Epstein? No, but I did, and it was called Humanity Plus. Now, Donald Trump, he never worked for Humanity Plus, but I did. And let me tell you, that was a corrupt company. And I was just interviewed by the Telegraph about them. And let me tell you, Donald Trump has no idea what it's like to be a working class techie. But I do, and I will defeat him with a pirate spaceship. I have a friend that worked at SpaceX, and we are currently building a blueprint to make this pirate spaceship happen. This isn't some cosplay. This is what we are currently working on. This isn't some little sci-fi fantasy. Transhumanism isn't sci-fi. Transhumanism is what we are working on now. Transhumanism is our party. We are the future of America. We are transhumanists. Thank you for tuning into this debate, everybody. Thank you for your support.
Thank you, candidate Haywire. Now, you may have noticed you did speak for 10 minutes, and I decided to allow that. I'm going to extend each candidate's introductory remarks to 10 minutes because there may be more to speak about in the campaign update than might fit into 5 minutes. So, candidate Ben Zion, you now have 10 minutes. Please feel free to begin.
Excellent. I'm pleased to give you an update on how the Futurist New Deal is going. And as you know, my candidacy is Poe. Say hello to Poe. My candidacy is centered around a reform ticket called the Futurist New Deal, and that is focusing on near-term policy initiatives for e-governance and some related matters. We published a long-form pamphlet on all of these reforms that we are working at. And it's also focused on economic reforms. Like candidate Haywire, I also have a basic income. And it is about double. That would be about $1 a week for every adult compared to $500 a week. It would be funded by something initiated by our predecessor, Zoltan Istvan. And that is something called the federal land dividend. And so it would not add to any concerns about taxes or hyperinflation like that of Andrew Yang or Rachel Haywire. But the economic discussions and the policy discussions in the course of this election have been incredible. I commend all of you for making those efforts. I was so pleasantly surprised in seeing the quality of the debates that we've been having on policy matters. I've been able to talk to a lot of people about some other public health initiatives including some that are being worked on by our Arizona Transhumanist Party. I'm the chair of this party, and our members have been working on public health initiatives. I mentioned this health services initiative and the legal fund for life extension. And, I was talking to some people in other organizations, Humanity Plus, for example, about some of these things. There's a lot of ways to approach these kinds of things, a lot of things we can do. I do not share Rachel's opinion that Humanity Plus is a failing organization. And I don't think the 6,000 life extensionists and techno-optimists on that mailing list are going to share that opinion either. It's one thing to court controversy for controversy's sake. It's quite another thing to attack people who have devoted their lives to techno-optimism. And I was a little taken aback by that, I have to say. In recent weeks, I've had so many great developments with respect to policy matters. Just this morning, it was delayed because because I did it the night before. I sometimes like to turn around these things in the same day. But just this morning, I posted an interview with Estonian emissary for e-governance. His name is Florian Marcus, and it was an incredible interview. I would encourage all of you to check it out. And we talked about a little bit about life extension and public health concerns in this area, but mostly we were focusing on iVoting, the second of the three major points in the Futurist New Deal. And the iVoting is something that Estonia is head and shoulders above other nations in doing. And as a result, Estonia has been able to improve their public health service to such a degree that it came up in our discussion. They are on the verge of being able to use big data breakthroughs and automation and advanced algorithm breakthroughs to move their public health service in the direction of something that is more prevention-based and more life and extensionist friendly. And here in the United States, we haven't done that. We don't really even have a public health service except for specific subsets of the population. And that's quite sad. It's something we need to fix. It is another of the major points of the Futurist New Deal. And, Rachel Haywire a few moments ago made a mention of tragic political violence. Just today, there was a shooting in El Paso, Texas. Rachel Haywire a few moments ago. Hey, that's me. That was fun. Okay, and a tragic event. And I know where Holsopple stands on the issue of the assault weapons ban that expired in 2004. I'd like to hear I know where I stand. I've done plenty of press on this subject of gun safety, and I have strong feelings that we need to have a country where children can go to school without having to wear bulletproof backpacks. Now, I've been a hunter in my life. I prefer the bow now, but even so, I'm not of the mind to think that guns will be snatched up and people will be terrorized by this. But we have to have some standards in this country. Children shouldn't have to live in fear. Parents shouldn't have to lose sleep every night that their child is going to die by doing something so simple as going to school. It's a terrible, terrible tragedy that we have 35,000 gun deaths a year in this country. It's preventable. Most every other nation has something closer to slim to nil gun deaths in the developed world. And we need to be doing better on that. We mentioned a controversy that's been lighting up the internet. The idea that Mr. Epstein is supporting transhumanism and supporting neo-eugenics ideas. We must denounce this most fervently, and I will include my comments in what Gennady has mentioned, a statement against this kind of transhumanism. This is not our kind of transhumanism. Our kind of transhumanism is getting radical life extension and human development initiatives to all the people who would accept them, just basically everyone. Everyone is effectively one of these de facto life extensionists, I do believe. There's a few isolated communities of people who might prefer to avoid emerging biomedicine as it becomes available, but that's a very small number of people. And that is what transhumanism is about. We have to be better than that. We also have to always be promoting these ideas of life extension, even in the face of these controversies, even in the face of these hellish behaviors. This is something that I agree with very strongly with Rachel Haywire, that decriminalization of sex work will make it so much easier to stop white slavery, sexual slavery. And that is something that we can be doing now with her platform or with the Futurist New Deal. Other kinds of decriminalization are things that we must do. Those things will lead to decreases in violence as well. And so this is absolutely where we are and what we need to be doing. I mentioned Florian Marcus. I spoke to another prominent radical life extension advocate today on the telephone in a pre-interview. The two previous interviews that I did in the day before and hours before the Florian Marcus interview were also with prominent radical life extensionists. That's how it's going to be. I've been doing about 20 interviews a week with people like this to promote this organization and to promote the Futurist New Deal. And through November 2020, that's how it's going to be. And there's a certain momentum to that. And it's something that I hope that you can all recognize and support and consider the Futurist New Deal. We need to be doing better by the people in this country with these economic reforms, with making governance something that is more user-friendly. There's no public will to be doing this in the United States in the way that there is in Estonia. And it's quite incredible what this small country, which was on the verge of economic collapse just a few decades ago, which was a Soviet satellite state, a lot of difficulties there in that transition. And what they chose to do was not allow lobbyists to take absolute control of their government, as is very much the case in the United States, but rather to starting in the early 1990s and beginning in a very real way in 2005, to allow emerging technology to become a central feature of how citizens interact with the state. And as a result, the reports in this country of people's trust of one another, of people's trust of the government, are much higher than the United States. Voter partition rates also about double what they are in the United States in the average election. And this is because these people had the political will to stand up for something as simple as digital democracy, which should be the standard in every single nation. So I ask you to support digital democracy and the Futurist New Deal, and support this very lively and very focused campaign for U.S. president. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Ben Zion, for your introductory remarks. Now we will move to candidate Charles Holsopple. Please provide us a 10-minute update on your campaign since the most recent debate.
Okay, thank you. Well, primarily what I've been doing is through social media, word of mouth, really any way that I talk to people, phone solicitors. If I have their attention, I try to get it immediately, something that provokes their thoughts and their feelings and get some feedback from it. And I try to present them with a big idea. And that's something that I believe that we need as a nation right now to bridge those divides that we find ourselves in, politically, racially, all of those things that people try to make us on a team, on one side or the other, with really false equivalencies of what those cause and effects are. We're not using critical thinking. We're just caught in an echo chamber. And so we need a big idea, and one that each generation can relate to, one that addresses our existential threats, one that improves our health and our well-being, one that provides us with hope and provides us with dignity. an idea that won't get lost into that echo chamber, and one that gives us confidence in each other regardless of our differences, one that educates based on science and ethical use of our resources, one that affects, and this is very important, our refugee crisis and what causes those refugees and what we're going to do with them, both presently, but also in the efforts to build a prosperous and peaceful society. So that the idea is it helps us adapt to the to the effects of the changing climate. So that idea is, for me, Project 222. And that's a nonprofit that I have started about 1.5 years ago. And that's what really got me into the Transhumanist Party, not directly, but the project was sponsored by the Institute for Education, Research, and Scholarships out in California, founded by Newton Lee, a transhumanist and, in fact, author of the Transhumanist Handbook. And after working with Newton for about 1 year, a little over, he had the idea that I should present myself as a potential candidate for the Transhumanist Party. And the reason he did that is because when you overlay the core values of the Transhumanist Party and that of Project 222 and actually the Institute for Education, Research, and Scholarships, when you overlay those values, they are not there are no discrepancies. It doesn't contradict each other. So I'll tell you what Project 222 is, and since politicians often repeat themselves, I won't apologize for this, but Project 222 is a declaration that we are all better off when each of us have dignified access within civil society to a minimum of 2 gallons of clean water a day, 2,000 nutritional calories, and 200 cubic feet of secure shelter. Now, it took me 15 years of contemplation and activism as a human rights advocate that in order to come up with that little equation. And I think when it's put on paper and when we look at it as a nation, it's an idea that stimulates and provokes thought. And that's what we need in the Transhumanist Party, is something that says it's memorable, it's different than every other political party. We need a unifying message, and we need a human rights message. And if that human right is to radical life extension, but it's not a responsibility of society. The society needs to provide for those basic needs. I'm all for all of the technologies that advance our existence, but when it comes down to it, I think we have to use an equation that brings up those least among us, as well as fulfills the life and the imagination of those of us that are on the upper edge of the socioeconomic structure. And it's curious the reactions I've received from the people I've talked to. One of the I hadn't thought of, or maybe I hadn't consciously thought of, is what 222 would do to reduce crime. And of course, that's another, you go from reducing crime to the cost savings to the less incarceration. And so if people have dignified access to food, water, shelter, they are less likely to commit crime because much of it is in desperation. And it's people are seen really as, once they lose that dignified access to food, water, shelter, they start living in the streets, which we have 20 million people that are borderline. Many of them are actually in the streets of our cities now. And that is a major issue. And we've got hundreds of thousands, millions of people, internally displaced people all over the world that are suffering from those exact same things. So if we can bring a strong message to the debate, I'm not going to be elected president. I have no expectation of that. But I do want to be able to introduce the transhumanist platform along with 222 as its main messaging to those other platforms, so that we can actually get behind people that are, when I say get behind people, as I said, I'm an activist and have been for 15 years, and I spent months in a tent during the Occupy movement with all walks of life. There were homeless, there were doctors, there were attorneys, a lot of veterans, and they were looking at very real and present dangers to our society. I never heard transhumanists, but they would, most of them would be transhumanists because they want to use technology to radically extend the lives of those that are in the streets that may be suffering from malnutrition and can't contribute back to society. Anyway, a lot of good thinking people and a lot of educated people. So through that activism, and then tying that with the Transhumanist Party, I think we can make a strong message that does go beyond this transhumanist primary. And one of the ideas I had is when we go to rallies, if we can get our message out, and if we can talk to those people like I've talked to in the street that say, yes, it seems reasonable and it seems feasible that we as a society can do that we have the technology and we have the resources, that if that was a mission, that we could provide food, water, and shelter on those base minimums, at least, to the global population. Now, I'm not a scientist. Maybe that's not true, but if that's not true, we have to come to realize that. I personally think that it's true. We can do whatever our imagination allows. And if our imagination is based in science and available technology, it's not something that we can pretend to do. It's something that we have to make the tough choices in order that we redevelop our economy to one of peace and prosperity based on those common needs of the population. So, as I say, I've been preaching high and low. Don't want to use that word preaching, I guess, but I've been consulting people high and low at different universities, and I've reached out. We've been able to get members in Cameroon and Ghana, throughout Africa, and many countries in Asia, of people that are familiar, and many listening now that say, we in underdeveloped countries or in areas that we've had climate change impact, we see a very clear path to 222, because that we've been deprived it either all of our lives or because of some natural disaster. And I think all of us here in the United States can start to relate, whether by flood or storms, fires, all of the changes that we are experiencing, all of the catastrophes and the displacement of populations across the United States, we need to address, and we need a plan to do that. And using 222 within the Sustainable Development Goals and within our internal national emergency response within FEMA, we're using similar numbers. So it's relatable to those that are doing the work, and it's relatable to those that want to finance the work and give their philanthropic dollars and their compassion to help others. 222 is one, it's catchy, and two, it is a common denominator in what it takes to sustain life. And we can argue that within the eminent domain for those materials, technologies that should not be privately or corporately held, that impede the flow of food, water, and shelter to the global population in minimum amounts. First, we must take care of those most in need, and then we can advance all the wonderful aspects of transhumanism, and we can promote it. But we need a message that grabs the attention of the electorate, whether it be Republican or Democrat. And these people that I've talked into in the street, whether they be homeless, whether they be doctors or lawyers, or I wish I could talk to some Indian chiefs, but they have all given positive response. And I hope to better articulate the message and gain the cooperation and the advice and counsel of those more educated than I in how to actually implement that. And that's the beginning of a cabinet, or at least a shadow cabinet. And I'm not familiar with the total membership of the Transhumanist Party, but I know it's relatively small now, and we need to grow it so that we can actually have an impact in the local elections and hopefully next year's presidential election. I'd like to do as good a job as I can to promote transhumanism this year, without the expectation of being president. But if I were, I would pledge to do the best that I can the same way and defend the country from enemies, both foreign and domestic, the same as I did when the oath that I took in 1972 into the U.S. Army. So I don't know if that's my 10 minutes, but I'll yield my time to answer questions.
All right. Thank you, Candidate Holsopple. You spoke for 12 minutes and 30 seconds, and we will adjust your time accordingly for some of the subsequent questions. But we do appreciate your overview and your introductory remarks. And that was the easy part of the debate, ladies and gentlemen. Now we will move on to the more challenging part of the debate, where for each candidate, I have developed 6 questions that are specifically intended for that individual candidate, addressing some of that candidate's history, positions, statements, and actions. Some of these are more along the lines of clarifying questions in order to have our membership be better informed about what the candidate actually believes. Some of these questions are about certain controversies that the candidates have been involved in. And I would suggest that this is an opportunity for our candidates to also set the record straight. If they believe that a certain version of a particular narrative is correct, if they believe they need to bring certain facts to the forefront of our members' attention, this is their opportunity to do so. Now, the modus operandi that I've adopted here is that I do not shy away from controversy, but I do think that sunlight is the best disinfectant. So by airing these issues in a civil, public, structured forum, we can hopefully resolve them, get to at least an approximation of the truth, and give the public a good amount of information for them to make up their minds. So with that, because of the speaking order that we determined, our first question will go to candidate Rachel Haywire. Candidate Haywire, one of your stated positions supports, quote, restrictions on imperialist global trade. What kinds of restrictions and what extent of restrictions would you advocate? Do you view all global trade negatively, or are there only particular kinds of trade that you would consider imperialist in nature? And for each of these questions, there are 3 minutes allotted. You don't have to spend the entirety of the 3 minutes. If you do not, that time can be saved for subsequent interactions. So candidate Haywire, please proceed.
First and foremost, trade with China. There's way too much of it going on. They've taken our patents. They have a surveillance state that is absolutely horrific. We need to drastically cut down on trade with China. Just because they have cheap technological goods does not mean we should be doing business with them. There are plenty of other countries that are manufacturing efficient technology that we could be trading with instead. Not to mention that there are plenty of American tech workers that are manufacturing technology right here on our own soil. We need to be closing the trade to China loop drastically. I think that we should be doing trading here at home as much as we possibly can. So while I wouldn't cut down on all imperialistic trade, I would like to cut down on most of it. Most global trade is imperialistic in nature because we are doing it by force. We are conquering other countries and their resources and using this kind of American globalistic attitude in order to use other resources in the name of humanism and progress. But we're really doing is hurting working class Americans and their employment opportunities, their jobs, their liberty on our own soil in the name of humanism. It's a very and a lot of progressives and liberals in America fall for it, or they're afraid of going against the politically correct narrative because they don't want to be seen as racist. But fact is, there is absolutely nothing racist about advocating for doing trade here in America. There is nothing racist or homophobic or Nazi. And for the record, I'm Jewish. So if you call me Nazi, you're absolutely insane. There is nothing racist or Nazi about advocating to do trade here in America. The fact is that a lot of global trade is imperialistic. We're taking other countries, we're importing their goods, claiming that they are our own goods. We're having sweatshop factories, not only overseas, but here in America. We're importing them here. We're paying them $2 an hour to manufacture cheap goods, selling them to high-end tech companies, and then putting our American flag over their cheap goods in the name of progress. This is absolutely corrupt and imperialistic. I think that we need to restrict it. Restrict it with a capital R. Rated R for restriction. Let's not do that anymore. China, how about China? How about China? You have got to go. Bye-bye. Don't like it.
All right, thank you, candidate Haywire, and I will add 10 seconds to your time for subsequent questions. The next question will go to candidate Ben Zion. The question is, some of your comments during your most recent July 30th, 2019 interview with Steele Archer suggest that you consider an emphasis on the rights of future sentient entities, including artificial general intelligences, to be misplaced. Could you clarify this position and furthermore, explain how you view documents such as the Transhumanist Bill of Rights, which focuses on broadening the applicability of rights to such sentient entities that may be encountered or developed in the coming decades? Candidate Ben Zion, you have 3 minutes.
Yes. Well, this is largely an order of importance question. I feel that some kinds of problems have derived from a focus on, or lack of focus on regulating certain areas with advanced algorithms that have the appearance of being something like artificial persons. You know, we think of Cambridge Analytica and any number of influence operations which this is a part of what they were doing. This kind of manipulation is a more likely near-term outcome than artificial personhood in the next 15 years. So we're going to see an acceleration of that kind of manipulation. But in due time, I do believe that we have prospects for artificial personhood, just in the way that I think we have prospects for uplifting of creatures. You know, Poe here, he's not signed up for a life extension yet, but I think that some of those things are in the cards for all of us. And you know, life extension is, of course, a separate matter from uplifting of creatures or artificial personhood. But these prospects are good. And I do not feel that the references to this in the charter documents should be removed. And I've said as much in other interviews as well, only just in the way that maybe candidate Holsopple a few moments ago made mention of radical life extension being an important goal, but humane economic policies and similar approaches to ending human misery being higher on the list. And I think that we'll see some concerns along those lines with advanced algorithms, where Google or far more unscrupulous servers than Google can host many hundreds of millions of artificial personalities and absolutely glut the market in the marketplace of ideas with their own corporatist agenda. That's something that we have to watch out for. That's not 40 years away. That's going on now, and it's going to continue in larger and larger number as we move on. So we need to be thinking about that I think that's a higher policy concern. But no, I wouldn't change that language.
All right. Thank you, candidate Ben Zion. And we are going to add 40 seconds to your time for subsequent questions. Now, we are going to move on to candidate Holsopple. You noted both during this debate and during the previous debate, as well as in a subsequent interview with Steele Archer, that you are a relative newcomer to transhumanism and the Transhumanist Party, having been introduced to them by Newton Lee within the most recent year. What would you say qualifies you to be a prominent spokesperson for the transhumanist community, and what would you do to effectively communicate transhumanist ideas to the general public? Candidate Holsopple, you have 3 minutes.
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, when I say I've been active in the Transhumanist Party and really just aware of the Transhumanist Party, I've lived my life in many ways right in line with the transhumanist core ideals. And so when I did see the Transhumanist Party and said, okay, well, let's face it, 1 out of 10,000 know about the Transhumanist Party or something in those numbers. So we have a huge gap to fill in. Who knows they're a transhumanist, the same as I found out that the transhumanism is very much in line with my ideals. And I think that's evidenced by the fact that I am the author of Project 222, and that fits together. So I'm going to leave it to the viewer and to the people that are going to hear about the Transhumanist Party and going to hear about 222, whether I'm going to be a good leader or not. But what I did say is that I want 222 to go beyond. And what's happened just from this exercise is that anybody that looks at this election campaign will understand 222 a little bit better and decide whether or not that's something that they agree with, and at the same time, whether they agree with the core values of the Transhumanist Party. And I think we'll get some good results from that and grow the party. I know our goal is 10,000, as you have stated, that we can reach some form of just getting over the edge, and then hopefully go exponential from there to make a difference in the political conversation and the scientific conversation and really the global conversation on what's important and what we need to do and how we need to do it. And I'm going to rely on the transhumanists, whether they be a registered transhumanist or just a unknown transhumanist that they just haven't heard the word yet. And I'll do what I can to spread the word.
All right. Thank you, candidate Holsopple. We are going to add 45 seconds to your time for subsequent questions. And now we return to candidate Haywire for your next question. You currently have an active GoFundMe campaign entitled Exposing Corruption in Silicon Valley. In fact, you just posted an update about that yesterday to your Facebook profile. In the description, you write, quote, "I'm going to write a memoir about my personal experiences in Silicon Valley involving several transhumanist startups and think tanks. I will discuss the good, bad, and ugly as I expose the corruption at its very core. I will name the key players that are keeping life extension technology at the hands of the rich." So tell us about to write such a memoir. Have they evolved in any way since you originally started this project? And if you do intend to write this memoir, do you believe that there is an actual conspiracy to keep life extension technology limited to a small, wealthy elite? Candidate Haywire, you may begin.
Yes, it's actually not a conspiracy because it's out in the open now. I mean, a lot of people have come to me and they've told me that they have been denied cryopreservations by Max Moore, the CEO of Alcor. So this is out in the open, and it's not a conspiracy. They were told that they didn't have enough money, so they couldn't get cryopreservation. I advocate for legal protections for cryonics patients. It's part of my platform. The book, it's going to be entertaining. You know, it's going to talk about a lot of my experiences in Silicon Valley as a working class founder and an artist. I do plan to name people involved. One of those organizations is Humanity Plus, who was just revealed to be taking over $100,000 from Jerry Epstein, the child rapist. I recall Ben Zion was just talking about how he was talking to them and working with them. About 20 minutes ago, he was saying that he'd been communicating with them. Now, I don't know if I would be communicating with an organization that was taking over $100,000 from a child rapist. That's just me. But yeah, the GoFundMe, it's not huge right now, but I've raised over $500 for it. I've gotten a good agent to help me get the book out there. I've written 4 chapters for it. I've been doing a lot of investigative research. People on the inside have been coming to me and telling me their stories. And I think it's going to be really entertaining to a lot of people, and it's going to reveal a lot of information. I think it's time for we the people to take transhumanism back into our own hands and to create a better transhumanism, to make life extension accessible to everybody, regardless of their economic status. And I think that as people begin to become aware of these stories of corruption, that transhumanism is going to become more accessible, that it's not going to be in the hands of a few wealthy people. It's not a conspiracy. I mean, this is known. I mean, I've talked about it. I was on a show called The Rundown Live, in which I discussed these things. I outed Humanity Plus before they made the news, before everybody was talking about this child rapist. I had outed the organization. So yeah, but there's no conspiracy. It's just what actually happened. This is public knowledge, and I'm happy to talk about it. But the book, it's not just about that. I'm also going to talk about a lot of the parties that I went to. I'm going to talk about the rationalist community, cryptocurrency. I'm going to talk about a lot of the more interesting things that happened, a lot of the friends that I made, a lot of the ideas about AI. I think it's going to be an entertaining book, and I hope that you all read it. I think you guys are going to have a good time reading my book.
Thank you, candidate Haywire, and you did speak for exactly 3 minutes. So now we will proceed to candidate Ben Zion. Now, candidate Ben Zion, you have many posts on your social media profiles which are highly critical or derisive of Donald Trump. Do you consider the Trump administration to be opposed or antithetical to the goals of transhumanism, or does it have some areas of compatibility? Moreover, do you perceive any equivalent threat or concern arising from some hard party line Democrats who wish to defeat Trump at all costs and have fallen into the mentality that anyone who does not vote capital D Democratic is an enemy? Candidate Ben Zion, you have 3 minutes.
Yeah, no, that brings to mind a sort of a Russiagate red herring. You know, a lot of concerns there, but people are using it as a partisan talking point. No, I don't imagine that Donald Trump is an enemy of transhumanists. I think he's an enemy of humane domestic economic policy and pro-worker initiatives and a sound business policy on the world stage. Rachel Haywire mentioned ending trade with China, escalating this trade war. You know, 150,000 people have lost jobs just due to steel tariffs imposed by Donald Trump alone. Those effects cascade out into other industries. Other industries have more or less been wiped off the map because of this trade war. This is a child's idea of how business is done in a post-industrial framework. And I would also say about this Epstein concern. A lot of people get donations from people. That doesn't mean that they know who they were from. It doesn't mean there's a lot of weirdness going on here. It reminds me of kind of a right of return discussions on people on the hard right as it relates to some senator or congressman who could claim Israeli citizenship. Those guys didn't actually do that. Those guys are just making a red herring up. And I think that's what's going on here with Humanity Plus. And also, you seriously attacking Humanity Plus? That's 80% of our base right there. That's a 6,000 people mailing list. You're going to just attack them because of something that's going to be in the news cycle for another 72 hours? I don't understand that at all. But yes, Donald Trump is not uniformly a boogeyman. He's done some things. You know, I was talking to a gentleman today in a pre-interview, and we talked about right to try legislation. We need things well beyond this. We need right to try legislation that this administration has forwarded for everyone in the interest of radical life extension. That is my main campaign goal, and all of the Futurist New Deal initiatives are structured around moving us into a society that can achieve that goal. I'll defer the remainder of my time.
Yes, thank you, candidate Ben Zion. You have gained another 40 seconds. And now we will move to candidate Holsopple. You already described the main emphasis of Project 222 and its pursuit of giving access to everyone to a minimum of 2 gallons of fresh water, 2,000 nutritional calories, and 200 cubic feet of secure shelter. However, most of the residents of the United States already have access to these basic necessities, as well as many goods and amenities beyond those necessities. And these are the people who comprise the vast majority of the voting population as well. What would your platform and your campaign have to offer to those individuals who already have the 222 goals fulfilled, but who still face various other problems in their lives, including the problems that only future technological progress can resolve, like death and various diseases of aging?
Well, that's exactly right. So it's not a singular campaign, but one that, yes, most people do have it's clean water, food, and shelter. There are hundreds of thousands living in the street that don't. There's nowhere to use the toilet. There's nowhere to bathe, or nowhere to find shelter. So, and I've lived empathetically with the people in the street in Berkeley for a while, and it's not something that has an easy exit. And the more you get into it, the worse it is. And what I've noticed is there is a lot of empathy within the general population for those people. They recognize that with the stroke of bad luck, that they could be in that street. So they want security. So it's not just bringing aid to those that are currently in need of it. It's implementing different systems that can be developed to create a redundancy that ensures the security of the population, both with and without those elements at this point. And there's a lot of philanthropy that wants to just help. And there's also a lot of industry that wants to invest. And if we build an economy based around the provision of these basic needs that protects the environment, that protects the rights of workers, that protects the rights of both those with and those without, we can get a message. Now, working out the details of exactly how that works on the mind, there are psychiatrists and psychologists. There's all of the stimulus that gives us thought, intention, and fear in that echo chamber. It needs to be dissected by something that we can see as an individual and as a society, something that we can trust, some fabric of existence beyond just getting in the car, getting gas, trying to going to work, coming home, and trying to raise our kids, and really not ever getting on top of society. So though the vast majority of the population has dignified access to food, water, and shelter, they're concerned about their water all over the nation and that water supply. We're concerned about our food supply and the nutrition and what we can buy at the grocery store and how nutritious it is and what effects it has, whether it be, and we have to rely on science in order to identify what best actions we can do as individuals that are in a power to help to help redirect all of our tax dollars and our consumer dollars to a more sound investment. Right now, we're consume. Fortunately, we're getting a handle. There's more information coming out on what our oceans are dealing with plastics and microplastics, how that's getting into our body. So the idea of clean water, just as Rachel's taking us right now, we need to know where that came from and how it affects our body, and to use science and our technology to do that. It's a bigger picture than just those that we can obviously see. And there's a big percentage that have food, water, and shelter that don't have dignified access to it, that they're abused at their jobs, they're abused in their domestic relationship. And so though that food, water, and shelter is on the surface available to all, dignified access to food, water, and shelter it demands and a daily grind for a large segment of the population. And that basic need costs the individual taxpayer in healthcare, in military expenditures. So the best job we can do in getting food, water, and shelter and basic minimums, both within our borders and without, the better our security will be. And at the end, we're all seeking a sense of security, and we can do a better job as a government, and that's what I would advocate for.
Thank you, Candidate Holsopple. You spoke for 5 minutes, so that does subtract 2 minutes from your time, but we will proceed now to the third question for Candidate Haywire. Candidate Haywire, in various interviews, including with Robert Stark and Justin Murphy in 2019, you discussed the concept of so-called national futurism, which you also wrote about in your 2015 book, The New Reaction. Could you please explain what you mean by national futurism? How is it different from nationalism? And do you believe national futurism to be compatible with transhumanism? And if so, how? Candidate Haywire, you have 3 minutes.
National futurism is the next step of transhumanism. It is a DIY nationalism in which we can create occult imperiums of our mind through technology. National futurism is nationalism without the statist materialism. It is a higher level of occult technology. You know, frankly, I'm bored with all this respectability in the Transhumanist Party, all of this curtailing to the mainstream. You know what? People think that we're all a bunch of fringe lunatics. It doesn't matter if we're Zion or Charles Popsicle or Janati, what's your last name again? People think that we're all crazy, okay? People think that we're all a bunch of fringe lunatics. I mean, I'm Rachel Haywire. So why don't we stop being concerned with respectability and focus on what matters? The new art right. Rachel Haywire, national futurism, culture. Yes, I wrote a book called The New Reaction, and it was later called The New Art Right. And I wrote a chapter called National Futurism. I did. I take nothing back. I apologize for nothing. I don't believe in the prestige economy. I believe in a higher stage of humanity. In fact, that's why I'm running for president, because we need to make politics entertaining again. And we need to make politics fun again. And I'm sorry if people had a problem with me calling China imperialistic just because I was wearing headphones that might have been manufactured in China. I'm sorry if you guys think I'm a hypocrite because I said some things about China that might have upset your third position about China being really cool for some upcoming national Bolshevik tech war. Sorry. You know, national Bolsheviks, sorry if I upset your far left, far right sensibilities, but you know what? The Transhumanist Party is kind of boring right now, and we need to make it more fun, okay? National futurists of the world, unite. Fact is, I'm the only candidate in this entire boring party, excuse me, Humanity Plus and your child rapist vendors, that's going to make transhumanism popular again. That's just reality. And you can say that I'm arrogant, you can make fun of my costumes, but I'm going to make transhumanism cool again. I'm going to make transhumanism fun again, and I am going to take you guys for a ride on my pirate spaceship into infinity. And we are going to build national futurist universes of the soul, okay? We are going to create a new art right, and it is going to be incredible. Our spiritual insurrection is going to lead the next stage of transhumanist evolution. Go beyond the center with me. Forget about respectability politics. Enjoy this new dark bohemia. Rachel Haywire is the new evolution. Thank you, citizens.
Thank you, candidate Haywire. Now, you did spend the 10 seconds you had previously accumulated, so your balance of time is essentially at the default levels now. The next question will go to candidate Ben Zion. How do you plan to bridge some of the ideological divides in the transhumanist movement, specifically around economic theory and policy, where transhumanists have a wide variety of perspectives and many disagreements?
Well, not with speeches like that. I could make a deep fake of Jim Jones's face over that, and I don't know that I could tell the difference. You said, Rachel Haywire, you said that you don't take anything back, but you changed the title of that book so it wouldn't sound like you're a neo-fascist. Some of that sounded an awful lot like neo-fascist talking points. Yeah, there is a lot of diversity in this party, and we should respect that. The marketplace of ideas can support this level of discourse, and it's why in crafting the Futurist New Deal, we opted to not be describing a marginal tax rate dramatically higher than that exists. This whole program was created with this diversity in mind. So I don't think that this is as dangerous of a thing as you might suppose. I will also say that we have lost our true north in founder Zoltan Istvan, because he was such a staunch advocate for life extension. And in crafting this campaign, the Futurist New Deal, we considered making it an emulation of his campaign on that one particular, focusing on radical life extension. We opted not to do that in this way, but I cannot say enough how important this public health outcome is. And to candidate Holsopple, he mentioned that we have to focus on other matters before we can become a civilization that focuses on life extension. I think that that focus in and of itself will bring out humane outcomes. We have a society that doesn't value human life. 55% of workers in this country are working in service jobs, and their wages are artificially low. They're working 40, 50, 60, 70 hours a week, and their housing costs are kept artificially high. There's a lot of ways that we can be improving upon that. And domestically, I think that the Futurist New Deal basic income is the best approach. Zarin asks if we could explain this land tax a little more. Yes, as you may know, these public lands are held in great number. And 85% of them are not national parks. And we could be leasing out those 85% to carbon neutral companies and a whole lot of other organizations, as long as they are able to stipulate to a certain set of conditions, being carbon neutral and having a certain design aesthetic. And in doing so, we could raise $173 trillion in 10 years, enough to fund a basic income without offending the sensibilities of these people who don't want to see significant added costs to our system, as Rachel Haywire's basic income would add. Thank you.
Thank you, candidate Ben Zion. You spoke for 3 minutes and 10 seconds, so a slight subtraction from your subsequent time, but you had accumulated some time before that as well. So now we move on to candidate Charles Holsopple. Candidate Holsopple, what technological advancements would you advocate as far as reaching the 222 goals? And in what ways would those technologies enable large numbers of people to reach much higher standards of living than the 222 baseline? Candidate Holsopple, you have 3 minutes.
Well, let me take 10 seconds. Would you repeat that? There was some rustling that I could not hear a few of those words. So
yes. So what technological advancements would you advocate as part of reaching the 222 goals? And in what ways could those technologies enable large numbers of people to reach much higher standards of living than the 222 baseline?
Well, you know, what I have done is taken the approach that I do not know the answers to the questions that I'm asking, but I do have confidence in the scientific community that candidate methodologies would put forward, and they would be different for many different locations. So the ideas that the hundreds of thousands of non-government organizations and the government organizations that are spending our money, they know these problems, they've identified the problems, they just haven't put them into the algorithm of 222. So what I would do, particularly if I were president, I would have a ball, because I would have a top security clearance and above. So I would have information on what technologies are currently being restricted. What I would ask to what patents and intellectual properties are being protected that are actually harmful to the general population. So as far as looking at those technologies, what I would do is not go penalize the corporations, but give those corporations the opportunity to reinvest in knowledge-based transformation of their industry. And I would encourage that in every industry as we face these looming existential threats. So looking out too far, I think really takes our eyes off the ball. We have to assume that what we're accomplishing today is something that we're going to need to take with us forever. And we have to get down to those basic needs, and using those technologies for water purification. I don't know, do we put 50 ships a day, mega tankers, up to the melting ice and bring it back instead of oil? You know, and have industries built upon these new resources and technologies. The fortification of food crops through natural selection, drought-tolerant crops, putting people to work planting forests and maintaining those forests, and giving them give them an education on what unit of work is required. In coming years, less unit of work is going to be required per calorie, right? I mean, if we use technology, there will be less work required. So the shelter concept, back to your original question, is that's how I got into this and got into activism. I came out of the commodity lumber business, where homes are built stick by stick, stone by stone. And I came up with an inflatable idea that could be rigidized and made into permanent settlements. And I took that to scientists, and they wanted to move with it, but they did not have the funding. So those are some of the technologies: advanced building techniques, food fortification, and different water accessing technologies.
Thank you, Candidate Holsopple. You've spoken for 3 minutes and 15 seconds. So I think at this point, we will proceed to the next question for Candidate Haywire. Candidate Haywire, in your 2018 book, The New Art Right, which, as I understand, is a second expanded, enhanced edition of the New Reaction, as well as in various other writings, you refer to an aristocracy of artists, or so-called aristocrats of the spirit. Could you please elaborate on this concept and discuss who these aristocrats are or would be, and what would be their role in the society you envision? Candidate Haywire, you have 3 minutes.
Yes, I'd love to. Well, first and foremost, it's people that aren't into the respectability politics that the mainstream Transhumanist Party is so focused on. Frankly, I'm disgusted by this appeal to prestige and respectability that has been going on in these debates. I mean, like I said before, we're all seen as a bunch of lunatics, so stop trying so hard to be respectable. People think we're crazy. Anyway, what are these aristocrats of the spirit that people like me and philosophers like Evola have been talking about. We're the new art right. We are beyond class. We are a new class of artists. We are not lower class, working class, middle class, upper class. We are a higher class of artists that transcend the notion of economic class. We are a higher class of the mind, a higher state of consciousness. We belong to a new spiritual vanguard. This spiritual vanguard is in line with transhumanism. We are transgressive artists that belong to a higher spiritual prototype. And through funding the transgressive arts, we can create technology that ushers in this post-Marxist, post-class ideology. So we can create a virtual kingdom of technology in which we can reign. Because frankly, hierarchy is backwards now. We have people at the bottom, at the top, people at the top, at the bottom. We have these respectable bureaucrats running things when you know what they should be running? Downward. We should replace them with robots. I mean, how are they different from robots? They're just reading a script. You know what that script should be? Run by actual robots. I mean, who are the real aristocrats? The artist. We don't run by a script. We run by our own decisions. We run by our own choices. We have autonomy. We are the aristocrats of the soul. And that is what we are. We are the vanguard. We are the Haywire vanguard. And when we fund the transgressive arts, and no, this is not neo-fascism. Neo-fascism, Mr. Zion, is the bureaucracy that you are enforcing as you support taking money from a child rapist, okay? That is neo-fascism, child rape. What I'm talking about is art, okay? There is nothing fascist about art. Art is beauty. Art is creation. And aristocracy is what I am advocating for, going beyond class, as Charles talks about, going beyond poverty and creating a beautiful kingdom of visionary technology. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Haywire. You spoke for exactly 3 minutes. And now we proceed to Candidate Ben Zion. Your fourth question is this. You have previously posted on Facebook in response to Democratic Party sympathizers that if you receive the Transhumanist Party nomination, you intend to campaign until August 2020, at which time you plan to endorse a Democratic candidate. However, one of the commitments that each Transhumanist Party primary candidate was asked to make in completing the Declaration of Interest form was that if the candidate won the nomination, the candidate would run for office as a USTP-endorsed independent candidate until Election Day 2020, which is November 3rd, 2020. The form also notes that, quote, this commitment requires that during the time prior to Election Day 2020, the USTP-endorsed candidate shall not concede to or endorse another candidate from another political party. The USTP-endorsed candidate also shall not run on behalf of any other political party. In light of this, have you reconsidered your outlook regarding the endorsement of a Democratic candidate prior to Election Day 2020? Candidate Ben Zion, you have 3 minutes.
Well, Rachel Haywire and I have both endorsed Andrew Yang in a variety of ways. That doesn't mean that we're going to be throwing a monetary or organizational support to those operations. So no, that endorsement that you alluded to is nothing of the kind that you described. We have a responsibility to grow this organization, and we've all been working to those ends. There's honestly, I think that attacking Humanity Plus is a big strategic error. Whatever you may think about that organization today, they're not going anywhere. That's a huge mailing list. It's, you know, half of the people who are going to vote in this election are on that mailing list. I'm never going to endorse somebody like Epstein. It's a good thing that such people are in jail. It's a good thing that sexual slavery and the maltreatment of children is being discussed more as a result of this. We cannot have an overclass who is immune from prosecution as we do today in the oligarchy states of America. And this is a discussion that's being advanced very much by this. Somebody donating money to you. I mean, how many donors do you have, Rachel? Do you are you vetting them all before they send you money? That's not a realistic prospect.
Am I allowed to answer that, or?
Candidate,
sure, I defer the remainder of my time. Thank you.
Very well. So candidate Haywire, candidate Ben Zion just gave you a minute and 20 seconds to answer that.
Sure. I have a fair amount of donors. I'm not going to be answering that question right now because that's a personal issue. And I would like to say that I have a lot more donors than he does because I have a Haywire.
Well, let's just jack the conversation because you don't want to answer the question.
And he does not have his own website up because he doesn't have anything up except for a bunch of crappy videos.
We have a number of websites up.
Nobody has watched your videos. I have a haywire2020.com website. You have a bunch of videos up that nobody has watched. And also, I would like to say that I would like to vote for your dog, but I would not like to vote for you because you are boring. B-O-R-I-N-G.
You boring, bitch. You boring.
Okay. All right. Let's go. Let's just have a lot of schizophrenic talk for the rest of the time. Why not?
All right.
Boring.
That is enough for this segment. We will now proceed to candidate Holsopple. Candidate Holsopple, the next question for you is this. You have stated that you think that the life extension goals will most likely be reached based on their current funding, whereas the 222 goals require more active effort. However, many prominent scientists pursuing life extension goals, such as Bill Andrews and Aubrey de Grey, have frequently emphasized that lack of funding is their primary limitation to the rate of progress in their field. If you are nominated by the Transhumanist Party, what measures would you advocate to remedy this lack of funding situation?
Well, I would put priority on life. And those lives that are around today, and the ones that are coming, that is just going to be a natural course. We're going to continue to bear more children, and that's a certainty. Otherwise, all bets are off. But the technology to radically extend those lives on the planet now would, in my campaign, take a lesser priority to those that are actually suffering basic lack of the essential elements of food, water, and shelter. It's a priority system. It's not that I would defund the technological advancements that are possible and seem reasonable and feasible that deserve funding, because it can help all of the people that are alive today. The one technology and one discovery doesn't just impact the reason for the scientist that is trying to solve a particular problem. Often it goes throughout the economy and is to the benefit of all. So I recognize that, but my first priority is the basic dignified access to food, water, and shelter to all people.
Thank you, candidate Holsopple. And
I would like to say, for whatever reason, my phone keeps draining. So if you lose me, I totally apologize.
Yes, that's no problem, candidate Holsopple. And if we lose you, we'll try to find a way to reconnect you. You have regained a minute and 30 seconds of time in your answer to this question. And now we proceed to the next question for candidate Haywire. I think you could have expected that this one was coming. I deliberately left it open-ended. What are your views regarding the alt-right?
I think that we need an alt-right because the alt-right is boring and stupid and violent, and we don't need people like that in our country. What we need is an alt-right where people are creative and self-expressive. That's why I changed the title of my book to the alt-right. I'm reading in the YouTube, we don't need a candidate without self-control. I fully agree with that. Just to be clear, before I was being performative because I think that we need entertainment in our party. We need to entertain people. I think that politics and entertainment are very important. We need culture, we need art, we need film, transgressive art. Self-control is very important. The alt-right has no self-control. Now, the alt-right, we can control it by having funding. The alt-right is something that we need to work to optimize through creating an alternative to the alt-right, through self-expression, through creativity. We can work to channel the dissent of the angry working class to build an alternative to the alt-right in which self-expression is not harmful. And I'm very big on this. As somebody who was attacked for being Jewish from people on the alt-right, they attacked my website, trigger warning, when I founded it 5 years ago. It was very, very horrific for me. I have had very negative experiences with those people, and that's, when it came to me, we need to create an alternative, and that's where I came up with the idea for the alt-right, and that's where I decided, we need to stop this violence from occurring. So transgressive art funding is very important to me. UBI, I'm very big on public education, on transhumanism. I personally had people come to me, they said, Rachel, I used to be a neo-Nazi. I'm not making this up. I can even produce blogs. And when I saw how people on the alt-right were treating you, I decided I didn't want to be a part of that community anymore. I'd much rather be a part of what you're doing. I think that you're a cool person, and I don't like how these anti-Semitic people are. I don't support this type of rhetoric. I really like your writing. And now that those people are no longer involved in the alt-right, now they're involved in the alt-right, and I'm very happy about that. I have no problem with people getting away from the alt-right and becoming a part of the alt-right. In fact, I love to see that kind of thing happen, and I encourage everybody that's watching this that has people that they know that might be involved in the alt-right to tell them to read my book, tell them to pick up a copy of the new alt-right. There is an alternative to the alt-right. You can be angry, you can be working class, you can be sick of what's going on with political correctness and not be a racist, anti-Semitic shitlord.
Thank you, candidate Haywire. You spoke for exactly 3 minutes. Now, candidate Ben Zion, the next question goes to you. What is the Ben Zion Institute and what does it do? Candidate Ben Zion, you have 3 minutes.
Yeah, sure. So the Ben Zion Institute is the name of my influence operation, which is connected to about 25,000 people. And it was in the process of rebranding as we speak and before this. And Rachel Haywire pointed out how her videos are so popular. She's made a couple of videos. My reach is significantly higher. She thinks says a lot of things about how she's bringing all of this. Look at if you search hashtags around this party, and you can get a pretty clear idea of who's going outside of the echo chamber. Charles Holsopple is doing a great job with that. Not only is Rachel Haywire not doing as good of a job of that, in my opinion, but also attacking people like Natasha Vitamour and Max Moore in a debate of this kind. It's not just being somebody who is Jesus. It's not just being somebody who is colorful. This is chaos, as Rachel Haywire said at the beginning. That's no real end. And we have to kind of, in everything that we do along these lines, we have to be advancing people's discussions and being provocative, not just attacking people who have supported this organization from its inception.
Thank you, candidate Ben Zion. And we will have another minute and 30 seconds added to your time. And now we proceed to candidate Holsopple. Candidate Holsopple, if you are nominated, how will you ensure that the transhumanist message is prominently advocated alongside the 222 message? You have 3 minutes.
Well, we're back again to the similarity of the core value. And though I am new to transhumanism every step of the way, and every person that I have talked about transhumanism with, they first go, what? And then they go, oh yeah, I believe in that. So transhumanism would actually benefit 222, and 222 would benefit transhumanism. I certainly don't see a conflict, and I do see the discussion, the big idea, bringing in the Transhumanist Party. And as again, the chances of me being, well, you didn't say elected to president, you meant receive the nomination, I suppose. Those would be two different things. But yeah, I see the messages being very, very much aligned. There's no conflict, and one hand washes the other in this regard. It's two different perspectives on the same thing, and the more people that we can bring into the party, the more that discussion enriches and identifies those common threads within the party. So I would reach out to those scientists, those within the party, those that are better at politics than I within the party, to present their case, offer criticisms. I'm not going to be anybody else. So I'm not going to become super educated, or I'm not going to change much. And what I do have is I have a passion for justice. I have a passion for truth. And if those things are, if those perspectives are carried on, those values are carried on, then the Transhumanist Party would be very well represented, I feel.
Yes, thank you, candidate Holsopple. You spoke for 2 minutes, so you have regained a minute of time. And now we proceed to the 6th and final prepared question for candidate Haywire. Candidate Haywire, you have stated publicly before that you have been the victim of a cyber stalker for about 15 years, and that this individual published false information about you that remains online. What can you tell our viewers about this to enable them to distinguish the truth from the falsehood? And furthermore, how does this unfortunate experience inform your views on ways to combat cyberbullying and online harassment?
Thank you for asking me that. Unfortunately, in the comments, people are saying that I'm easily triggered and that I'm always making myself out to be a victim. I find that to be unfortunate, because what I've been seeing is that Zion has been making himself out to be a victim. He's been posting maybe like 12 comments in a row on the Facebook group nonstop, complaining about how he's been attacked by me because of alleged bikini photos of me that don't exist. Meanwhile, he's been posting comments from my stalker, who was arrested many years ago. And what I want to say is, yes, I was a victim of a stalker, but I do what I can to not let that affect me to this day. You know, I'm living a fulfilling life. I'm working on music. I'm working on writing. I'm working on running for president. I think that we do need to create new initiatives to stop cyber stalking from affecting people. And I think that other victims of cyber stalking should be speaking out and making sure that this kind of thing does not happen to people again. But most of all, we should make sure that we do not take the lies of cyber stalkers seriously, and that we do not spread their information as fact, like candidates like Ben Zion do. We need to make sure that documented cyber stalkers who have court records on them are not used as political tools, and that we don't take their information and spread it publicly. If you are a victim of cyber stalking, I just want you to know that you can come to me and that you're welcome to lean on me for support if you would like to talk about it. Now, people are saying, here we go, she's making herself out to be a victim. You know what? I'm not. I'm just talking about what happened. Now, if you want to talk about someone who has made themselves out to be a victim, I would talk about Ben Zion, who's constantly complaining about how he's being sabotaged by techno-fascists, because that is true victimhood, thinking that techno-fascists are sabotaging his campaign, when meanwhile there are actual victims of stalking that are working their asses off to make things happen for the Transhumanist Party. So, you know, just put things in perspective. Make sure that you don't believe the lies of stalkers that spread misinformation, and make sure that you're protecting yourself online and not believing malicious gossip. Always be real, always cross-check everything, always make sure that you're questioning your sources, and always talk to the person. If you read something about somebody online, always ask the person what the truth is. Always make your own mind up.
Thank you, candidate Haywire. You spoke for 3 minutes. And now we pose the final prepared question to candidate Ben Zion. Candidate Ben Zion, while you are clearly a left-leaning candidate, what are your major concerns with the Democratic Party and the major ways in which you as a transhumanist candidate would be different from the Democratic candidates?
Yes. Well, in every way, we would be different from the two-party system. And I don't consider this system to be, these two parties to be sufficiently distinct from one another to even be called two parties. They are both corporatist parties, and undermine them in every way. I'd like to take a moment and talk about what Rachel Haywire was saying a moment ago. Rachel Haywire was kicked out of the Foresight Institute, and as she mentioned in this debate, fled to the other side of the country as a result. She has a lot of people in that history who don't want to do business with her anymore. You know, we could name 4 or 5 other organizations, you know, around this kind of conversation. So she can make herself out to be the victim if she wants, just as she's in the same breath as she's attacking the biggest mailing list for people within our worldview.
Funded by a child rapist. Don't forget that part.
Okay. I don't know what that was, but
it was funded by a child rapist.
Candidate Ben Zion is currently speaking. You will have the opportunity for rebuttals later. Candidate Ben Zion, please proceed.
I'll defer the rest of my time to the schizophrenic.
Neurodiversity.
Yeah. It helps if you want to promote some ideas. It helps to be able to string 2 sentences together. You're not going to be able to sit down and do any interviews that way.
I think, given that you've deferred your time, candidate Ben Zion, we will move on to candidate Holsopple for his last question. And his last question is this. It appears that achieving the 222 goals is easier in some parts of the United States and in the world than in others. So in your view, what are the main obstacles to attaining those goals in some parts of the world today? Are they primarily technological, cultural, or political, or a combination of the above? And how would you work to remove those obstacles? Candidate Holsopple, you have 3 minutes.
Well, yes, I think in order to achieve those goals of food, water, shelter, it is imperative that we actually put a quantity on what we're talking about doing, so that we can factor in the cost and what technologies would be most useful and applicable in that condition. And that could be anywhere from identifying the fact that this population cannot exist in this space. We're going to have to move them to another location, give them a migration opportunity, and also in there that they can comprehend had clean water or food or shelter in